The world 1.2 million years ago was not a place for the faint-hearted. Vast sheets of ice crawled across the continents, carving valleys and swallowing forests whole. Between these frozen dominions stretched endless grasslands, silent, windswept, and alive with the thunder of migrating herds. Mammoths marched like moving mountains. Saber-toothed cats stalked the plains with ancient patience. And in this ruthless theater of nature, the first humans took their place among giants. Imagine standing there, no cities, no walls, only the relentless cold and the whisper of predators in the distance. The sky itself seemed larger, a canvas of smoke and light where survival was painted in fire and blood. Yet, amid the chaos, there was a strange kind of beauty. Life persisted. Fire flickered in the caves, defying the eternal winter. Small bands of humans gathered around its warmth, their faces glowing with the spark of something new, awareness. These early tribes didn't just endure, they adapted. They watched, learned, and transformed danger into knowledge. Every gust of wind, every mark on the soil, every cry in the night carried meaning. From the bones of hunted beasts, they built tools. From fallen branches, they built hope. The world was cruel, but it was also a teacher, and humanity, its most attentive student. Close your eyes for a moment and picture it. The smell of smoke, the hiss of snow against stone, the rhythmic breathing of a world still young. Somewhere in the Cho, darkness, a flame flickers, and around it, the first storytellers speak in grunts and gestures, sharing lessons of survival. They didn't yet know it, but they were laying the foundations of what it means to be human. The world 1.2 million years ago wasn't just a landscape. It was a test, a crucible that forged courage from fear and innovation from necessity. To live meant to build. To build meant to imagine. And from that imagination, the first shelters, and perhaps the first dreams, began to take shape. If you can feel the chill of that ancient wind and imagine standing beside those first firemakers, leave a like to keep this flame alive. And tell us in the comments what you think would have been the hardest part of surviving in that raw, untamed world. They did not stay still. The world was shifting beneath their feet. And so were they. Driven by hunger, climate, and the instinct to survive, early humans began their endless journey. Across frozen rivers, volcanic plains, and deserts of dust, they moved, step by step, generation after generation, following herds, chasing warmth, and unknowingly writing the first chapter of human history. Imagine a horizon stretching forever. Behind them, a dying fire. Ahead, an unknown land shrouded in mist. These were not migrations of comfort, but of necessity. The ice ages came and went, reshaping the world like a living tide. Glaciers crushed valleys, seas receded, and vast bridges of land connected continents. Through these fleeting windows in time, tribes of Homo erectus and Homo antecessor wandered from Africa into Eurasia, carrying nothing but stone tools and unyielding resolve. Their footprints marked every landscape, from the sun-scorched savannas to the shadowed forests of Europe. They faced predators that would terrify even modern humans: lions twice the size of those we know, hyenas with jaws strong enough to crack bone, and wolves that hunted in the silence of snow. Yet somehow they endured. They found rhythm in movement, wisdom in wandering. Each migration was more than a journey. It was an experiment in survival. They learned to read the seasons, to understand where herds grazed, and how the wind whispered the promise of water. The tribes that could adapt thrived. Those that could not vanished into the ice. But with every loss came knowledge, a deeper understanding of their place in this colossal breathing planet. And along the way, something else began to stir within them. They started to recognize patterns, to remember paths, to return to familiar places. The concept of home was forming, even in motion. The world may have been hostile, but it was also a map. One they were learning to read with their feet, with their instincts, with their very survival. By the time they reached new lands, They were no longer the same as those who had left. Each journey carved resilience into their bones and stories into their souls. Migration was not just movement, it was transformation, the very engine of human evolution. Their footsteps still echo beneath our own. Every city, every nation, every modern road began with these ancient wanderers, guided by stars, survival, and the endless call of the unknown. Long before the first stone walls or wooden huts, survival depended on the rhythm of the land. Nature was both enemy and ally, merciless, yet generous to those who understood her language. Every branch, every bone, every piece of flint offered a choice: perish or adapt. The first humans chose to adapt. Their hands were their greatest invention. With nothing but instinct and observation, they turned the wilderness into a workshop. A sharp rock became a knife, a mammoth bone, a hammer, a stretch of hide, a blanket against the wind. These were not mere objects. They were extensions of thought, the earliest evidence that humanity was beginning to shape its destiny rather than simply endure it. The shelters came next, born not from design, but from desperation. At first, they sought what already existed: caves carved by time, overhangs of stone, hollowed trees. But as they moved through the unpredictable landscapes of the Pleistocene, necessity forced innovation. Using branches, mud, and animal skins, they began crafting spaces of their own, fragile, imperfect sanctuaries that stood against the breath of winter. Picture it: a clearing surrounded by frost, smoke curling through the air as figures work in silence, their movements slow but deliberate. Children gathering moss for insulation, hunters dragging massive bones to form a frame. These primitive shelters, half cave and half dream, were humanity's first architecture, built not from blueprints, but from instinct and courage. What they lacked in permanence, they made up for in meaning. Each shelter was a declaration: we belong here, even if only for a night. Inside those walls of sticks and fur, life unfolded. Fires burned, stories were born, and for the first time, the darkness outside had a boundary. The line between wilderness and home began to appear. The tools they made were crude but revolutionary: flint flakes sharper than steel, bone needles that stitched hides into protection, and wooden spears hardened by fire. Every invention pushed them one step further from extinction. Every adaptation whispered the same truth. Survival was not about strength but imagination. They were builders not of monuments, but of moments, carving security from chaos. And though none of their shelters remain, their legacy stands in every home built since. From the simplest lean-to the tallest skyscraper, the impulse is the same: to create a space where life can endure. No one survived alone. In a world ruled by teeth and ice, isolation was death. The early tribes understood this instinctively. Their greatest invention was not the spear or the fire, it was each other. Cooperation became their invisible shelter. Small groups of hunters, gatherers, and caretakers moved together like a single organism, bound by trust and necessity. Every task was shared: the hunt, the fire, the care for children and elders. The strong protected the weak, and the weak in turn offered knowledge, caution, and memory. Survival was a symphony, not a solo. At the heart of this unity was communication, not yet words, but glances, gestures, and rhythm. A raised hand meant danger. A low hum meant comfort. Around the fire, they learned to coordinate, to plan, to dream. It was here that the roots of empathy and culture took hold, born from the need to act as one. When a hunt succeeded, it wasn't a victory for one hunter, but for all. The meat was divided carefully. Every bite meant another night survived. Around those shared meals, laughter flickered like sparks in the dark, and though their language was primitive, their understanding of connection was profound. They had discovered that together they could shape fate itself. Even in the face of disaster, storms, predators, or the death of a leader, they adapted through unity, One tribe's tragedy became another's lesson. The stories they told by firelight weren't just tales, they were survival manuals encoded in memory. Through them, wisdom traveled farther than any footprint in the snow, and perhaps this is the secret thread that connects them to us. Cooperation wasn't just a tool for survival, it was the beginning of humanity's social soul, the same instinct that led them to huddle for warmth around. Ancient fires now drives us to build families, communities, and nations. So imagine yourself among them, the cold biting at your skin, the darkness pressing in, and knowing that the only warmth strong enough to survive the ice is the warmth shared between people. Now tell us in the comments, do you think cooperation was humanity's greatest strength, or just another step in the long path of evolution? The climate was both architect and destroyer. It sculpted the land and dictated every move of the creatures that walked upon it. For the early humans, it was an invisible master, one that forced them to think, adapt, and ultimately to build. Each shift in temperature carried consequence. When the winds turned colder, they learned to sink their shelters deeper into the earth, using soil and rock as insulation. When the rains came, they bent branches into domes, layering them with leaves and animal hides to repel the storm. And when the sun returned with fierce heat, they moved to the shade of cliffs and rivers, constructing open structures that breathed with the wind. Shelter was not one design, it was thousands, each one born from the dialogue between human need and nature's temperament. In the frozen expanses of Eurasia, some tribes began to use bones from mammoths as frames for their huts, covering them with hides thick as armor. To the south, in milder climates, homes of reeds and mud took shape beside lakes and rivers. Each construction told a story of adaptation, of life negotiated on nature's terms. Even then, humans were architects, not of grandeur, but of survival. The line between ingenuity and instinct blurred. They didn't build because they desired comfort. They built because the world demanded it. Every shelter was an answer to a question the earth itself had asked. How will you endure me this time? In that silent conversation, human creativity was born. Inside these primitive homes, the rhythm of life followed the weather's pulse. Fires burned, brighter on cold nights, their smoke marking the air with the scent of endurance. Children played near the entrances, where sunlight met shadow. Outside, the world was unpredictable, but inside, a fragile peace took root, the first hint of what civilization would one day call stability. Over time, as generations passed, patterns emerged. Tribes remembered which structures held firm in storms, which caves flooded, which directions the wind favored. Knowledge became legacy, passed through gestures, stories, and imitation. They were learning architecture not from books, but from the relentless hand of the elements. The climate shaped them as much as they shaped the world. It taught them patience, resilience, and foresight. And in answering nature's challenges, humanity discovered something profound: that creation was not just a means to survive, but a way to belong to the earth itself. Before the fire, there was only darkness, cold, endless, and merciless. It crept into bones, silenced the weak, and ruled the nights with fear. But when our ancestors tamed that first spark, everything changed. The fire was not merely light. It was revelation. It transformed the meaning of shelter forever. Imagine that moment. A sudden burst of flame licking the air, eyes wide with awe, the crackle of wood echoing against stone walls. For the first time, the night was no longer an enemy, but a boundary, a circle of warmth pushing back the void. Within that flickering glow, early humans found safety, comfort, and something deeper: community. Fire turned the center of a shelter into its soul. Around it, life revolved, families gathered, hunters mended their tools, and stories, the first ever told, were born in whispers beneath the glow. The flame became both guardian and teacher. It cooked food, hardened weapons, and dried the hides that formed their roofs. In its rhythm, humanity learned control, not of nature, but of itself. Every campfire was a heartbeat. Its smoke carried messages through the cold air, signals to other tribes, symbols of presence and persistence. The act of tending the flame became sacred. One careless moment could extinguish life itself, while one ember could carry survival into tomorrow. And so they watched, fed, and protected it, a silent pact between humankind and the element that mirrored their own spirit, unpredictable, powerful, alive. Over time, fire reshaped everything it touched. Shelters grew around it like shells around a core. Stones were placed in circles to contain it. Walls were designed to breathe yet shield the flame from wind. Even the layout of early settlements echoed its importance. The hearth always at the center, the heart of the tribe, the place where warmth met wisdom. But fire was more than a tool. It was the first metaphor. It taught humans to see light where there was none, to transform danger into guidance. It was inspiration made visible, a living reminder that creation often comes from destruction. Without fire, there would have been no stories, no tribes, no tomorrow. It was the pulse that turned mere shelter into home, and mere survival into the beginning of civilization. The world was always moving, and so were they. The great herds that fed them, the shifting seasons, the endless pursuit of warmth and water. Everything demanded motion. To stay in one place was to vanish. Thus, the first human communities became wanderers, carrying their lives upon their backs and their identities within their hearts. Their paths traced invisible lines across continents, through frozen tundras, dense forests, and burning plains. Yet wherever they went, they brought with them the same fire, the same stories, the same sense of belonging. These tribes were not defined by territory, but by memory. They were living archives of survival. Each group developed its own rhythm. Some followed mammoth herds across vast plains. Others hunted along river valleys rich with fish and vegetation. The patterns of migration became their culture, songs of direction, rituals of departure, and ceremonies of return. The landscape itself became part of their identity, each mountain and river carrying meaning beyond the physical. Home was no longer a place, it was a journey. With movement came connection. Tribes met at crossroads of migration, exchanging tools, stories, and occasionally, bloodlines. These encounters shaped early languages, gestures turning into shared sounds, symbols becoming words. Out of necessity, cooperation expanded beyond the family unit, weaving a tapestry of early humanity linked not by borders, but by the shared struggle to survive. Their shelters reflected this nomadic spirit. Built quickly, disassembled easily, they left little trace, just scattered stones, ash, and footprints that time would swallow. Yet, within their simplicity lay genius, structures light enough to move, strong enough to endure. Each tribe carried not only its fire but the blueprint of its resilience. Around every campfire, identity deepened. Marks on bodies, patterns on tools, and chants in the night became symbols of belonging. These were the first expressions of who we are, the dawn of culture, the whisper of civilization yet to come. The tribes may have roamed endlessly, but they were never lost. In their movement, they discovered continuity. In their impermanence, they found meaning. And in the vast emptiness of the ancient world, they carried one unbreakable truth. That identity is not where you are, but who you walk beside. Now imagine yourself among them, a wanderer of the ancient earth. Tell us in the comments, would you have thrived in this moving world or longed for a place to call home? Over time, the simple act of building shelter became something more than survival. It turned into an expression of identity, of belief, of the invisible link between humanity and the world around it. Every structure, every circle of stones, every mark on a cave wall carried meaning. Shelter was no longer just a shield from nature. It was a reflection of the soul. In the flickering glow of firelight, the first humans began to see their shelters not merely as protection, but as spaces of belonging. Within those walls of earth and bone, life took shape in rhythm. Birth, rest, storytelling, death. These places became sanctuaries where the tribe's heartbeat echoed, where the spirit of the group was kept alive. The boundary between the physical and the spiritual began to blur. Each tribe built differently, guided by their beliefs and their environment. In the north, huts built from mammoth tusks stood like monuments to the beasts that sustained them, a silent prayer of respect and remembrance. In temperate valleys, circular huts mirrored the cycles of the sun and moon, embodying renewal and eternity. Even the arrangement of stones around a hearth followed unseen rules, symbolic patterns passed through generations. The shelter became a mirror of the cosmos. The entrance often faced the rising sun, a promise of warmth, of beginning. The central fire symbolized life itself, its smoke drifting upward like a bridge between the earth and the unseen. To step inside was to enter a sacred order, one that protected not only the body but the spirit. And on the walls they painted colors made from earth, blood and ash, images of hunts, of animals, of dreams. These were not decorations, they were prayers. The shelter transformed into a world of meaning, where art and architecture were one. Every stroke of paint, every handprint pressed into stone whispered the same truth. We exist, and we remember. Through these creations, the first humans spoke to forces they could not see, to the spirits of the land, the ancestors, the unknown. Their shelters were altars, their fires offerings, their songs invocations. The act of building was no longer just necessity, it was communion. And as centuries passed, the idea endured. Even today, our homes are filled with symbols, shapes, rituals, and orientations that echo those ancient instincts. In every wall raised, there remains the shadow of that primal truth, that to build a home is to create a universe of one's own, a space where the human spirit can find refuge from the endless wild. Every lesson humanity learned in the prehistoric world came from a single teacher, nature. She was merciless, but never silent. Each storm, each drought, each failed hunt carried wisdom for those who listened. For early humans, survival was not about conquering the environment. It was about understanding it, blending with it, becoming part of its pulse. They learned to watch. The migration of animals foretold the change of seasons. The color of the sky at dawn whispered of storms, the cracking of ice, the movement of the wind, even the way shadows shifted across the land. All of it became language. Nature spoke in patterns, and humanity became fluent in her dialect. Adaptation wasn't just reaction, it was transformation. When the cold grew harsher, they stitched thicker hides. When the prey disappeared, they altered their tools, reshaped their paths. The world demanded flexibility, and the tribes that could bend without breaking endured. Each generation carried forward the memory of these adjustments, not as written records, but as instincts, carved into the fabric of their being. In time, this dialogue with nature turned into innovation. Observing how branches resisted the wind, they learned how to build stronger shelters. Watching animals dig for water, they discovered hidden springs. Even the way a predator moved inspired hunting tactics. The environment was not just their home, it was their mentor, sculpting intelligence through hardship. Through these cycles of learning, early humans began to realize something profound, that balance was power. To live meant to adapt, and to adapt meant to respect the boundaries of the world. They did not dominate the land, they negotiated with it. Each success was earned, each mistake remembered in blood and bone. This harmony, fragile yet enduring, laid the foundation for every future advancement. The ability to observe, to change, to invent. All of it began in those ancient landscapes where survival demanded curiosity as much as courage. And so, from the forests to the tundras, from the deserts to the coasts, the same truth echoed through time. Nature was both adversary and ally. Her trials shaped not only the bodies of our ancestors but the very essence of their minds. Humanity's greatest strength was never defiance, it was adaptation. From the bones of mammoths to the walls of skyscrapers, the line of human creation has never been broken. Every beam of steel, every home that shelters a family, every monument that pierces the sky carries within it the echo of those first shelters built under the trembling stars. The legacy of the ancient builders is not carved in stone. It lives in us. When early humans raised their first frames of bone and wood, they were doing more than surviving. They were imagining. Each act of construction was an act of defiance against chaos, a declaration that life could endure and even thrive in the harshest of worlds. From that spark of creativity came architecture, community, and eventually civilization itself. The principles that guided them still shape our designs today. The way a roof curves to shed rain. The placement of a hearth at the center of a home. The instinct to gather in circles, to protect, to connect. All are ancient memories, refined through millennia, but unchanged at their core. The modern home is a distant descendant of those first shelters of hide and stone, and every blueprint whispers the same story. We build because we belong. Even now, in cities lit by neon and glass, the essence remains. Our walls guard us from the elements. Our fires, now electric, digital, draw us together. We still crave what they did: safety, warmth, and the closeness of others. Progress has only deepened what was always true, that the urge to build is the urge to remember who we are. The prehistoric world may have vanished beneath layers of time and ice, but its lessons endure. It taught us resilience, ingenuity, and humility before nature's power. It showed that every structure, no matter how small, carries within it a fragment of human spirit, a story of endurance, transformation, and hope. To look at the skyline of any modern city is to see the shadow of the first campfires, the outlines of huts beneath the stars. We are still building the same dream, a place where life can thrive against the odds. So, as you finish this journey through the ancient world, take a moment to imagine those first sparks in the dark, those shelters rising from the cold earth. Because in the end, every stone they lifted, every wall they built, became the foundation of us. If this story made you see our distant ancestors in a new light, share your thoughts below, and stay with us as we continue uncovering the origins of everything that makes us human.